Mayorkas, yesterday your impeachment trial ensued in the Senate. I don't see this as a happy day or a day that I take relish or pleasure in, but it's a sad day in the sense that it's come to this. This isn't a debate over policy. This was a debate over malfeasance, a debate over whether you've been telling the truth and whether you've been enforcing the law. We have a disaster at our southern border, a disaster that becomes very personal to people. Lake and Riley's family, this disaster cost them the loss of a loved one. We have a disaster where people show up at the border every day and they just simply say, hey, I'm Joe Smith from Venezuela, and then they waltz on in. There's supposed to be rules. There are rules about paroling people. Under the Trump administration, a very small number of people were paroled. Under this administration, it's become a blanket parole. There's been the question, and you've been asked repeatedly, you testified to Senator Graham last year that parole is individualized. But then the administration has admitted that it's a public benefit to have migrants come in as migrants as opposed to illegal aliens, as if it's a difference. You know, a million people come by and we don't see them at all, and a million people come by and they stop and we give them migrant status, and somehow that's better, and there's a public benefit to that. But that's not individualized. That's judging people as a group. But I can't help but be sad for Lake and Riley and her family who didn't have to have this. And he wasn't paroled for any of those reasons. And we're going to get into that in the question and answer. You've either said you don't have the knowledge, you've been asked about this multiple times, but we're going to ask again, how did the murder of Lake and Riley get into this country? And what is the statute that allowed you to do it? How could you? And how could you sleep at night, you know, having done that? You know, there are laws. I mean, and that's what this is about. It isn't about whether or not the Biden administration believes in an open border policy. It's about whether we have laws and you're going to enforce them at all. The last administration was enforcing the law, and you just haven't been enforcing the law. And millions of people are coming across, and they've committed heinous crimes and murder. And Lake and Riley's family will never get her back. And yet that man came in and apparently was let go because they said it was full. There's no statute saying that when the camps are full, you just let people in. We have a system where we're just saying, hey, what's your name? And then we fingerprint you, and then off you go. I mean, we had over 300 people on the terrorist watch list come in and then are found at a later date to be on the watch list. We have people coming to New York. We fly them to New York. We give them money. We put them up in a hotel. They assault a police officer, and then as they come out past the cameras, they're flipping the bird to everybody in America. That's a sad day for America, and you presided over this. You presided over just a disastrous border. And it isn't a matter of policy. It isn't as a matter of you like open borders and we like, a more secure border. There's a law. We have a law, and you're supposed to enforce that law. And yesterday was a sad day because the majority went ahead and set the precedent that having lied to Congress, there wasn't going to be an examination of whether you lied to Congress. They were just going to simply say lying to Congress didn't rise high enough to be high crimes and misdemeanors. Chairman says, oh, we're just throwing rocks is why we didn't fix the border policy. It's just not true at all. The fix that was advanced legislatively was a fix that would have allowed 5,000 people a day before we would have taken extraordinary measures to try to slow the influx of migrants. But even after 5,000 a day, it was going to let migrants of no limit still come through the ports of entry. So it really wasn't a reform. It was a whitewash. All of the laws that existed under the Trump administration still exist under the Biden administration. You have all the powers that you need. The laws on accepting migrants to this country says the executive may admit migrants. Doesn't say the executive branch shall admit migrants. You could simply say we're full up, and we've got too many criminals, and we've got the horrendous thing that happened to Lake and Riley and to others. And we're just full, and we're going to stop taking migrants for a while until we can sort out the mess we have at the border. You have every power to do that now. You just don't utilize those powers. But it isn't about really being good at utilizing the power. We just think you're not obeying the law. And I think it is a sad day. Yesterday was a sad day that we had to impeach a member of the cabinet. But today is a sad day that the majority chose not to even hear the arguments, not to see the proof one way or the other and have a real trial. So I look forward to trying to get some of the answers today, and I hope you will tell the truth. I hope you will not just simply say, I don't know. You've been asked many times about Laken Riley's family. You should know everything about the alleged murderer, and I hope you'll explain to us how he got into this country and why that happened. Secretary Mayorkas, under your administration, the Biden administration, over 1 million people have been paroled. What is the criteria you use for paroling individuals?
Ranking Member Paul, the parole process is one that we execute according to the law. We make individualized determinations with respect to significant public benefit or an urgent humanitarian reason.
So for what reason was the alleged killer of Laken Riley, Jose Ibarra, paroled and allowed to come into this country?
Ranking Member Paul, first and foremost, all our hearts break for the family of Ms. Riley. Secondly, the perpetrator of this heinous criminal act needs to meet justice to the fullest extent of the law, and I will not comment on the particulars of the case because the matter is being prosecuted by authorities now.
This isn't on the case of whether or not he murdered her. This is on the case of why you paroled him. Why was he paroled?
My same answer, Ranking Member Paul.
You're refusing to answer the question?
I have provided my answer, Ranking Member Paul.
You're refusing to give any specifics about Jose Ibarra. Well, I have the documentation, and the document says that the subject, the person accused of killing Laken Riley, was paroled due to detention capacity. It was full. So is detention capacity statutorily allowed to be used as a reasoning for parole?
Allow me to assure you that individuals who pose a public safety threat or national security are our highest priority for detention. The reality, not just with respect to this administration, but every administration that precedes me, is that the number of encounters has exceeded the number of detention beds available.
The question is it statutorily, legally allowed to use the excuse that our camp is full? He was paroled due to detention capacity. Is that allowed under the law?
Ranking Member Paul, my prior answer stands.
Which means you're not going to answer the question. Are you pleading the Fifth Amendment?
No, Ranking Member Paul, I've answered the question.
Well, no, you haven't. The question is very specific. You have testified previously, and you have testified today that there are two reasons you can be paroled: urgent humanitarian need or significant public benefit. That's not the reason listed. The reason listed is parole due to detention capacity. Is parole due to detention capacity a lawful reason for paroling someone?
Ranking Member Paul, there are different bases for parole. I am not a legal expert in this regard, but let me assure you that when an individual is encountered at the border and they are deemed to be, at the time of encounter, a threat to public safety or national security, they are a priority for detention. If not, they receive a notice to appear and are placed in immigration enforcement proceedings. The number of individuals encountered at the border exceed the number of beds available in our detention facilities. That is not something specific to this administration. That is something that has been true.
You might have more beds if they remained in Mexico. Did the administration, when you came into office, reversed 92 executive orders of the Trump administration, which allowed them to apparently have people remain in Mexico, allowed them to have, probably 90% less parolees than you have? And so when you come to us and you say, oh, gosh, if we only had more legislation, we could do it, why don't you bring back the executive orders of Donald Trump that seem to be working? You immediately got rid of them for political purposes. The border's a disaster. Why don't you bring back the 92 executive orders that you reversed?
I respectfully, Ranking Member Paul, disagree with the premise of your question.
That's because you refuse to look at the facts, and it's still, I guess, insulting to all of us and insulting to the memory of Laken Riley and to the memory of others who have been killed by people who came into this country. March 2nd, an illegal alien who got into the country as a getaway killed Washington State Trooper Christopher Gadd, Haitian man who entered the U.S. via the CHNV parole program was arrested for sexual assault of a 15-year-old girl. March 21st, illegal aliens in El Paso rushed the fence. You saw that on national television. An illegal alien on March 23rd murdered 25-year-old Michigan resident Ruby Garcia. Chinese national came across the border and illegally breached a military base in California. I mean, the stories go on, and I think a lot of people in America are going to be appalled, that you refuse to answer the questions. Jose Ibarra, was it lawful to parole him? Was it lawful to let him in the country because you say the camp's full?
Ranking Member Paul is a former federal prosecutor for 12 years. I can say with tremendous conviction that individuals who commit criminal acts need to be held accountable for their crimes.
Well, that's not much consolation if you wait until after he's murdered somebody. See, part of the problem is, and I think people would be aghast to know this, that when you come in, you just give people your name, right? It's the honor system. There may be some databases you check, but certainly most of the domestic crimes in Venezuela probably are not in any kind of international database. So if you waltz into the country through your generous parole programs and say, I'm John Smith from Venezuela, you have no way of ascertaining that, and you still let them go. So you say, well, we're going to make sure that they're not a violent criminal. You have no way. You look in some databases, maybe they're not in the database, but you have no way of even knowing if that's their name. Then you give them biometric, you give them, you give them fingerprints. Now they have a new name and fingerprints. They essentially have been given a new identity by your agency. I don't know. I'm just so sickened and sad by the families that have lost loved ones from this. I don't see real remorse. I don't see you're willing to answer the questions. I mean, if it were me, I would be so upset by this. I would be doing everything possible to make sure that another Jose Ibarra doesn't get in. But apparently you let his brother in, too, and his brother's got a rap sheet 10 times longer than Jose does. And so, I don't know. All I can express is disappointment and bewilderment that the Democrats let you get away with it.
Mr. Secretary, you've seen this chart before. This chart not only shows just the undeniable reality of the catastrophe of your open border policy, but it also shows cause and effect. Dating back to 2012, the unlawful deferred action on childhood arrivals, that's what sparked all the subsequent crises. But I want to focus in the crisis that President Trump faced because of DACA, because of the reinterpretation of the Flores settlement. He was rapidly, the number of apprehensions or number of encounters at the border was rapidly increasing to peak in May of 2019 at about 4,800 per day. By the way, back in 2014, Obama hit his humanitarian crisis when you were part of, when he was Assistant Secretary, 2,200 a day. And President Obama called that a humanitarian crisis. But President Trump took action. He used the existing authority, although weakened by the Flores settlement reinterpretation. He used that authority and he secured the border. By April of 2020, we were down to a little over 500 individuals encountered at the border per day. 500. From almost 5,005. When you entered office, you reversed all those successful policies and you opened up the border and you've created this catastrophe, and it is a catastrophe. 6 million people, more than 6 million people, 31 states have a population less than the number of people you've let in, flooding these sanctuary cities. So I've got a very simple question. Why did you do it?
Senator,
why did you reverse those policies? Why did you open up the border? Why did you create this catastrophe?
Senator, I respectfully disagree with the premise of your question. We did not open up the border. Senator, we enforce the law. We are facing...
Do you deny you reversed the Trump policies that had secured the border?
No, Senator.
You deny that?
No, Senator. That is not what I said. We enforce the law. You
reversed the Trump policies that had secured the border.
Senator, if we can look at your chart, I cannot see the bar graphs. Forgive me, the chair is blocking them. But the former president's Remain in Mexico policy was implemented in January of 2019, and 2019 saw an almost 100% increase in the number of encounters over 2018.
Mr. Senator, it went down to 500. And then with COVID, he started expelling people under Title 42, which, by the way, you canceled and you didn't have to do that. Let me ask you another question. Senator Paul was talking about Lake and Riley. I mean, I on the floor of the Senate, read a list of a dozen people in the last 4 months publicized murders, rapes, a 2-year-old caught in the crossfire, crimes committed by people in this country illegally. That had it not been for your reversing of the Trump policies, for your open border policy, those crimes would have been committed. I've got another simple question. Do you ever, when you go to bed at night, do you have any regrets? Do you have any remorse for your complicity,
Senator,
in these crimes? I mean, your open border policy has aided and abetted the murder of Americans, the rape of Americans. There are people have lost their loved ones because of this catastrophe, this open border policy. Do you have any remorse? Do you have any regrets?
Senator, 2 points. One, very importantly, all of our hearts break for the victims of these heinous crimes and their loved ones. Secondly, the criminals who committed those crimes are responsible for their criminal conduct.
They wouldn't have been into this country had you not allowed them in through your open border. Do you ever call up the families of the crime victims? Do you ever talk to Lincoln Riley's family?
Senator, as I stated previously, all of our hearts break for the loved ones of those who have been lost at the hands of criminal conduct.
Good. Okay, so your heart is broken. Do you have regrets? Do you admit your culpability here? Do you admit that your actions have resulted in the deaths and the murders and the assaults of thousands of Americans? I've got the CBP statistics here. Assault and battery up 5.7 times over the last 3 years what it was in 2020. Homicide up 17 times. Again, these are from keep people in this country illegally. Sexual offenses up 2.5 times. Again, that's the direct result of your actions, of President Biden's actions. Quite honestly, of actions of Democrats in the Senate who refused to vote to complete the wall, which would have helped. It's not the full solution. The full solution is actually having a president and Secretary of Homeland Security that wants a secure border. Our problem is we have a president, a Secretary of Homeland Security, Democrats in Congress, who want an open border that caused this problem, and they won't admit it. They won't admit it. President Trump had the authority, he used that exact same presidential authority to open up the border. Now you refuse to secure the border. And by the way, this bipartisan bill, let me paraphrase, pretty accurate quote of Senator Schumer to Politico. He said, we were playing chess, they were playing checkers, and we got our Ukraine funding. And we're in a lot better shape than we were 3 months ago on the border. You weren't negotiating to secure the border. You were negotiating for political cover for yourself, for President Biden, or for the Democrats in the Senate and Congress. That's what you were doing. You were not serious. If you were serious about securing the border, you could have done it. By the way, if you were serious about having a closed border, a secure border, you would have let it remain secure. You would have left those policies that worked, that secured the border, that would have allowed us to establish a functioning legal immigration system. But you blew it all up, and that's the result. That's the result. That's the catastrophe. And you've been denying before this committee repeatedly that this isn't even it's not even a problem, Senator. It's a challenge. This is a catastrophe, and I cannot believe you have no remorse.
Expired. Senator Langford.
Secretary Mayorkas, you and I have spent a lot of time together. I would dare say that you and I have spent more time together than anyone on this dais. You and I both know there are things the executive branch can do, and there are things that Congress can do to be able to attack this. The challenge becomes trying to get those things implemented to be able to do it. There's a rumor that's out there that the administration's considering a change in 212F authorities and that there may be some new executive authority used during this time period. Can you give us some insight of what that might be and what is under consideration?
Senator, I'm very proud of the time that we spent together negotiating what would have been a transformative solution to our broken immigration system. We in the government consider consistently all the time what options are available to us. That is the responsibility of good government. We have not made any decisions that I'm in a position to announce today, but I can assure you that we consider all the options before us in executing our responsibilities to the American people.
You have an idea of a time period when that might be implemented? I know you're making some considerations on that. When would we know?
There has been no decision made yet. I don't have a time frame to present to you.
There were clearly, as Senator Johnson mentioned, there are clearly differences in how President Trump enforced the border. There's also differences in how President Obama enforced the border than how it's currently being done now through the same executive authorities of things that are out there. The negotiated agreements with Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador at the time that President Trump had achieved, we don't have that same kind of agreement with them. I've had some Guatemalan leaders that have reached out to me and said, we want to reestablish some of those same type of agreements that are there to be able to get that. We don't have some of the same enforcement mechanisms. I know the court stepped back in and said the remaining Mexico, the MPP, we've got to be able to reinstitute. The facility was changed on it, but the enforcement is different. There are differences that are there. I think what needs to be done here is President Biden, DHS, to use all the levers that you have to be able to enforce the border as President Obama did and as President Trump did. This Congress also has a responsibility as well. What we had negotiated together was doubling the number of deportation flights, dramatically increasing the number of detention beds, increasing agents, increasing officers, increasing the number of immigration judges, increasing asylum officers, changing the definition of asylum so that there's a more rapid turnaround in that process, changing the process for expedited removal so that you're not hamstrung with some of the court decisions that have been made in the past. All of those things were dramatic changes that Congress needs to do. So I've been hard on members here to say we've got work that we've got to do, but you and I have had frank conversations as well to be able to say there are things that the administration can do. I encourage State Department to be more focused on recalcitrant countries and turning people around. I encourage Department of Justice to be more clear on enforcement of things that they're not doing either right now. But the frustration that you hear from the dais here is a sense that, yeah, Congress has things that we need to do, but we don't feel like State Department, DOJ, and DHS is using every tool at their resource. So I would tell you, we're eager to see the 212F and what is being determined at this point and what can be done, because this last number I saw, I think we had about 5,800 people that crossed yesterday. And so obviously that's an intolerable number for everybody on it. If I can ask a quick question as well, you and I have talked several times about special interest aliens. This is a different group out there that's been difficult to get information about. It's a group that DHS has defined for a while as folks with a potential for a national security risk. We understand there are thousands of individuals that have been designated as a special interest alien, but we can't get any information on it. This committee that has the oversight has had one briefing on it, and it was last year. That was a bipartisan briefing, and Senator Sinema and I worked for months to be able to get that one classified briefing on it. Since that briefing time, we've asked for a follow-up, and we've gotten nothing on it to get details. How many special interest aliens? Where are they coming from? What are the details on those? These are folks that your team has identified as a potential national security risk. We don't know how they're being handled, but it is our understanding thousands of them are being released. Can you give us any clarity on that, and can you give us a time that we'll be able to get access to that information about those folks?
Senator, I'm very disappointed to hear that you feel that we haven't provided you with the information you've requested with respect to special interest aliens. I will work with my team to ensure a briefing of those of you who are interested in this very important subject in an appropriate setting.
Great. We have followed up. I have a list here of the number of requests. We've had 6 formal requests to your office just this calendar year, and every time we've not received an answer to it. So we absolutely need more information about this, because that's a very special concern to us to try to figure out how do we actually get that resolved. On the budget request that's coming out, when you and I worked on the supplemental piece, We included funding for 50,000 detention beds and for deportation flights to be dramatically increased. Part of the issue was, obviously, if we're releasing people, especially single adults, it just increases the number of people that are coming. If we don't turn people around, there aren't immediate consequences, then more people just come because there's a delayed consequence, which is really no consequence. So my question is, in the budget request, we're to 34,000 beds for budget request. Why that number when we know we could get up to 50,000, or at least to 40,000 we could get up to? Why a lower number in a budget request rather than the number that you know you need?
Senator, you know, the budget is, of course, presented under the context of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Our 2025 budget was presented before the 2024 budget was enacted. We fully support the 41,500 detention beds that were presented in the fiscal year 2024 budget. I continue to believe that in the context of the Senate's bipartisan legislation, the 50 or 55,000 beds was an advancement in our efforts, and we look forward to working with this committee and Congress on funding the detention beds that are needed.
I hope that's so. We've got to be able to get that resolved. That's a serious issue that only Congress can resolve, but we've got to be able to implement. We need the White House to also make the request on it. One last thing I'll just ask for the record, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, on this. DHS Ombudsman for Citizenship and Immigration Services found this statement: the parole programs that are currently being used at our southern border that are allowing more people to come in, the parole programs require diverting funding and employee resources within USCIS from other immigration programs. We've experienced this in our office. It's become harder for legal immigration. And the Ombudsman is saying it's because some of these resources are being funneled to the border processing parole there. Love to have a statement back from your office in writing on if that's true, what's being done to be able to change it. If it's not true, why is that not true?
Thank you, Senator Langford, and I appreciate trying to stay on that timeline. I appreciate that. For those of you who weren't here, we have our colleagues are all trying to. Everybody wants to ask questions. Everybody is scheduling tightly, so if you try to stay to your time, I would appreciate that. Senator Romney, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, in the last 3 1/3 years, during your term, there have been more illegal aliens released into the country than under the 4 prior presidents combined. I know there may be some in the country that applaud that, but I believe that, frankly, if President Biden is to be turned out of office, it will be largely because of that failure on your part and his part as the person who's responsible for policy. I believe, and I think the great majority of the American people believe, and that reason why I think it's such a political bomb for the president, that this is an extraordinary crisis and failure. Do you believe that the numbers that you saw that Senator Johnson put up, that huge increase in the number of illegal aliens being released into the country, that is a crisis and a terrible problem?
I have, Senator.
That's a yes or no.
Senator, I have said previously that it is a crisis, and it is something that we work to address every single day.
Good, thank you. Let me turn. The House, I believe, House of Representatives, took action to underscore the extent of this crisis. And the Democrats decided they didn't want to spend more time talking about that. But I'm going to ask you a couple questions. They're not intended to be hostile, but the House said that you lied when you said to the House in a hearing that the border was secure. Why did you say the border was secure? Was that a lie? What do you mean by that?
Senator Romney, allow me to assure you that I have honored the oath of office that I have taken more than 5 times in my 22+ years of federal service.
Let me go back to the question. That's as accurate as it is irrelevant, which is, my question is, you said that the border was secure. What did you mean when you said the border was secure? Is that not a lie?
Senator, you've asked me now if that is a lie, and I have assured you that I have honored the oath of office that I have taken.
In what way was it not a lie then?
Senator, with the resources and authorities that we have, it is as secure as it can be.
Thank you. Second question. The law states, and the House correctly noted, that encounters at the border and people seeking parole and so forth should be detained, and yet you release them. Why did you release them?
Senator, we release individuals into immigration enforcement proceedings when our detention capacity cannot meet them in detention, and they do not pose a threat to public safety or national security based upon the screening and vetting that we perform at the border.
Clearly, that screening and vetting was insufficient given the number of murders and other crimes committed by a number of those people so released. But is there a law when the detention facility is full? I understand why you say I can't put them in detention, which the law requires, if there's no more detention space. But does the law indicate what you then do? Because under President Trump, they were sent back to Mexico, as I understand it, and under your administration, they were released into the country. Am I wrong in that assessment?
Yes, you are, Senator, respectfully.
You want to explain in what way?
Of course, because I believe, and I want to be accurate in the data that I provide to you, and so I will verify subsequent to this hearing, Senator. I believe that a total of approximately 70,000 people were processed through the Remain in Mexico policy, and the balance were either detained or placed into immigration enforcement proceedings on a non-detained docket with a notice to appear. That is something that has been characteristic of our broken immigration system.
Do you have any sense of the proportion? How many were sent back to Mexico and how many were released into the country?
I would be pleased to provide that to you subsequently, Senator.
That would be helpful. The law also, and the House correctly noted, that asylum seekers should be evaluated individually, not released en bloc, and yet they were released en bloc. Why is that?
Senator, I don't know to what the House was referring, because we make individualized asylum determinations. Our asylum officers are trained to do so based upon the facts presented to them in each case.
Well, I would refer you to the articles of impeachment, which I presume you've had the chance to read. Is that right?
Actually, I have not read the articles of impeachment.
I probably want to do that because it alleges that you did not follow the law of the United States of America, and either you or your legal counsel ought to read that to make sure that you are following the law of the United States of America. But it indicates that individuals are to be evaluated individually and not let go or not released into the country en bloc, and yet it says that you did release en bloc large numbers of individuals into the country that should have been individually evaluated. Is that the case or not the case?
That is not the case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've used my time.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Senator Romney, a great deal, and your colleagues appreciate that. Senator Scott, you're recognized for your questions.
Secretary Mayorkas, you're the first cabinet official to be impeached in our country's history. I think it's a sad first for our nation, not because this wasn't warranted, but because it was completely warranted by your catastrophic failure that has created a wide open border. I personally fully support what the House did. I think I've been honest with you that I view your job, how I view your job performance. I don't believe not just once, but multiple times you lied under oath that that the border was secure. It's not. I think that's clearly a lie. And it's a lie that our nation is reeling for the consequences of your failures. I've talked to a lot of people at CBP and people at ICE, and they're doing the best they can. But your horrific policies make their jobs impossible, and they've been clear with me about that. Here's when I talk to people about you, they don't get it. They say, does he care about the thousands of Americans who have died from drug overdoses because of your lawless policies? Does he care about the Americans who have been killed and viciously raped by illegal aliens that you and President Biden have invited into this country? They say, do you care about the devastation that could happen at the hands of the hundreds of terrorists that have been let into our country? Does he care that even the FBI director is concerned about the terrorists you and President Biden have allowed into America? In my state, they're furious. They don't think you care at all. Just about everybody I talk to believes that America is a way more dangerous place because you have allowed criminals, drugs, terrorists, and other dangerous people into our communities. Just this week, the House Select Committee on the CCP released a damning report on the fentanyl you've let pour into America through the southern border. Here's how the AP reported on the committee's report. The article said, quote, the Chinese government not only subsidizes the manufacture of precursor chemicals, but the report says it is a thwarted investigation until illicit manufacturers by warning the targets of investigation when U.S. law enforcement has sent a formal request for assistance. Investigators said multiple current and former federal agents have described the notification of targets, leading those targets to revamp operation and make it harder to detect their activities. I can't imagine if I was sitting in your position, I'd like to hear this, but the government of Communist China seems to know that because of your policies and wide open border, you and President Biden have created that they get to do whatever they want. Now, what we know is Communist China wants to destroy the United States, and they want to murder thousands of Americans with fentanyl. Communist China has poisoned our nation and taken the lives of more than 70,000 Americans each and every year. I assume you know this, but I personally can't say anything that shows that you care about it. There are real consequences to your failure to secure the border, and every victim's got a name. Unfortunately, real Americans are being killed, families are being torn apart by vicious crimes and deadly drugs because we have a wide open border, and we do. Last time on the Senate floor, I spoke about one of the Americans who was murdered by Communist China's fentanyl that the cartels are pushing to our country every day. Name's Ashley Dunn. Ashley's mother said that Ashley was murdered by your failure to stop fentanyl from pouring into the United States. Other innocent Americans like Laken Riley are also paying the ultimate price for your failures. As we all know, Laken was brutally murdered, and an illegal alien has been charged with that heinous crime. Your agency just confirmed that this monster was in the U.S. after being paroled by DHS. Not for humanitarian reasons, but because you claimed you didn't have detention capacity. That's not how the law is supposed to work. What you did is against the law, and if you followed the law, Laken Riley would still be alive. If you look at the chart, it seems like must be over 10 million people have illegally crossed, 6 million have allowed to stay here, and you've rolled out the red carpet for them. There have been sexual assaults and murders committed by illegal aliens all over the country. Even in Florida, where just recently a young man was killed. The man charged with his death is an illegal alien. So let me go back to what I was saying in the beginning. The Republican majority in the House is now, they voted to impeach you for violating your oath of office. Whether you believe that was right or wrong, that happened. You should then have a trial to make your case. But unlike what happened in 2019 when Democrats alone voted to impeach the president and Republicans controlled the Senate, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer decided to deny you the ability to defend yourself in a trial. It seems to me that Schumer didn't want to let you defend yourself in trial for one of a couple of reasons. He's either acting out of pure political interest to protect his incumbent members who don't want to talk about your record and the wide open border you have created and all the crime, drugs, and illegal immigration it's allowing, or he's terrified of a trial exposing your failure to a degree that acquittal would be extremely painful for Democrats to explain to the American public. Here's what I don't understand. Just a few weeks ago, Senate Democrats all voted against a bill to stop illegal aliens from getting on a commercial flight with no verifiable ID. This is shocking considering that a recent report identified that in 2023 alone, you approved the transit of 320,000 inadmissible illegal aliens to 43 U.S. airports, pre-approved by DHS through the CBP-1 app, many of them going through my home state of Florida on commercial flights. Democrats voted against deporting illegal aliens who hurt police, like the violent attack on uniformed police officers in New York City by a group of illegal migrants, some of whom with known gang affiliations who unlawfully entered the country under your watch. And Democrats voted against the Laken Riley Act, which simply requires ICE to take illegal aliens who commit crimes into custody before tragedies strike. So it seems to me that Democrats have no problem voting to keep this border crisis going, and it's a crisis, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, and blocking every attempt that Republicans make to stop the crime and secure the border. But when it comes to you, they shut everything down and don't allow you to speak. You seem like a smart guy. You're a former prosecutor. Sure, you know how to handle yourself and defend your actions. I'm surprised you didn't read what they said about you in the House. Surely you believe you have a case to present to the American people on why you should not be found guilty. But you didn't get that chance, and Senate Democrats are setting a new precedent. They're destroying the rules and traditions of the Senate to keep you quiet. Do you think you're being silenced because Democrats are terrified of your record and unable to defend you, or because they don't trust you?
Neither, Senator.
Senator Hawley, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, let's just come back to Jose Ibarra, if we can. You know who that is. That's a question. You know what he did,
I know what he's accused of doing,
which is,
murdering a young woman.
and that wasn't the first crime that he committed in this country, was it?
Senator, as I've articulated previously, I'm not going to speak about the facts of the case because there is an ongoing criminal investigation.
Have you read his parole file?
Senator, same answer.
So you're not going to say whether or not you've read the parole file? I've got it right here. Have you read this?
Senator, I do not want to speak to the particulars of the case given the pending criminal prosecution.
Now, I find this interesting because this is a new answer today. You've changed your answers all over the map on this, and it looks like to me you just don't want to answer the question. 2 days ago, you were asked about this in the House Homeland Security Committee. I've got the transcript right here in front of me. You were asked the same question. Jose Ibarra, why was he paroled? You said, I don't know. You said, I don't know. I don't have the case details with me today. Congressman Bishop says, you don't know? And you said, I don't know. I don't have the details with respect to that individual's case, but I would be pleased to provide them to you, Congressman. You didn't know 2 days ago. Now, interestingly, on April the 10th, 6 days before that, you gave Senator Katie Britt a different answer. She asked you the same question. She said, why was Jose Ibarra paroled into the United States? You said, and I quote, Ranking Member Britt, there was no derogatory information of which we were aware. So you were happy to comment on the case then, on April the 10th. By April the 16th, you had developed amnesia, and today you say you just won't comment. So which is it, Mr. Secretary? Now that we have the file, I'll tell you what the difference is. Congressman Bishop didn't have the parole file, and Senator Britt didn't have the parole file, and now we do have the parole file. And now we all know that the reason he was paroled into this country was because lack of detention capacity, which, as you and I both know, is not a valid reason under the statute. And now that we know that for sure, this is right out of the parole file. Here it is. Subject was paroled due to detention capacity at the Central Processing Center in El Paso, Texas. Now suddenly you don't want to talk about it. This is extraordinary. It's also a pattern with you. So let me just try one more time. Have you read the parole file?
Senator, I'm going to give the same answer, and let me say it.
Well, which one? Are you going to give me the answer you gave to Senator Britt? Are you going to give the answer you gave to Congressman Bishop, or the answer you gave to Senator Paul, or do you want to try a fourth one?
Senator, I will not speak to the particulars of the case, given the pending criminal prosecution.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. Well, you certainly, of course you don't want to, because it is an absolutely damning indictment of your policies. Let's just review Jose Ibarra, and how he came to be here. On September the 8th, 2022, he was encountered by United States Border Patrol in El Paso, Texas, and was paroled into the United States due to lack of detention capacity. A provision, a proviso, a rule that is not permitted under the statute. You and I both know you know this. You knew it when you were talking to Congressman Bishop. You knew it when you were testifying to Senator Britt, and you know it today. You just never wanted to cop to it because the statute doesn't permit it. And so you lied to Congressman Bishop and you lied to Senator Britt. And now you are hiding behind the ongoing prosecution excuse because it's the last one left to you, because you testified falsely under oath. Then on July 19th, 2023, Ibarra reports for a biometric appointment and was fingerprinted. This is now in New York. The results come back and indicate he has a criminal history. So he's in this country, he has a criminal history. September 14th, he is arrested in New York by NYPD for what? Injuring a child. September 14th, 2023, he is arrested for injuring a child. What happens? The offense was never prosecuted and the arrest was expunged. I'm reading right out of the parole file. Expunged. Nothing is done to this guy. He had a criminal record to start with. He's in the country on illegal grounds. You have falsely and illegally allowed him in. He commits a crime against a child. He's not prosecuted. It's expunged. In November, get this, in November, Ibarra files an application for employment authorization. And unbelievably, on December the 9th, 2023, it's approved. So this is your policies in action, Mr. Secretary. A criminal is permitted into this country on grounds flatly not permitted, flatly contradictory to the statute. He commits a crime against a child, and then he gets a work permit. He gets a work permit. You want to know why all of the jobs in the last 2 or 3 years have gone to illegal migrants? Working people in this country can't get a job. Their unemployment rate's high. Why? Because of things like this. And then what's he do? Well, we all know. Then in February, he commits the heinous crime against Laken Riley. Is this a record that you are proud of?
Senator, you've misstated some facts.
I have read from the parole file, which you have said you don't recall, don't have, you miscited. I'm reading from it. It is right here. And I've just, pursuant to the speech and debate clause, I have just read it into the record. And the reason is, you have lied repeatedly to Congress and to the American people about this. They deserve to know. And the only way they're going to know is if I tell them. I've just told them. It's in the record now. I've read it verbatim from the parole file. Verbatim. I just want to know, why did you change your story so often? Why didn't you just answer honestly to Congressman Bishop and Senator Britt?
Senator, I am confident that justice will be vindicated in the criminal prosecution of the case.
Well, hopefully he'll get more of a trial than you got. Otherwise, there'll be no justice for anyone at all. Let me ask you something else. Travis Wolf, do you know that name?
Not off the top of my head.
Travis Wolf is a 12-year-old boy from Missouri. This is him. Travis was killed on December 20th, 2023, or I should say he was in a tragic attack on that night. He died some weeks later, head-on collision. The person driving the vehicle, who's now been charged with 6 criminal counts, is Indrina Bracco. Do you know who that is?
I do not, but let me communicate that I know that all of our hearts break for the family of this young boy who died in that accident.
Well, she's an illegal migrant here from Venezuela. Local law enforcement tell me that she was detained briefly at the border in 2023 and then released. And then she commits this crime. Multiple people have been stabbed in O'Fallon, Missouri by illegal migrants. Mr. Secretary, I know that you think your policies are a success. You've sat right there in that chair and you've told me over and over our policies are working. You're on the record years and years saying that. Maybe they're working for you. Maybe they're working for your political objectives, whatever they may be. I don't know. But they're not working for Laken Riley or Travis Wolf or the people of my state. They are, in fact, a travesty. What you have done is a travesty. And, sir, it is long past time for you to go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yesterday, we saw Senate Democrats set fire to the Constitution when they refused to allow your impeachment trial. You, sir, as the bidder of Joe Biden's policies, have set fire to the sovereignty of this nation, to the safety and security of this nation, in a total disregard to the law of the land. The Secure Fence Act of 2006 requires you to maintain operational control of the border. And they define operational control as preventing the entry of terrorists, unlawful aliens, and narcotics. You know, it doesn't surprise me now when I go back and talk to law enforcement officers in my home state, and they tell me that the crime crisis is so bad, the amount of human trafficking, fentanyl trafficking, and the crime related to those is so bad, they tell me that we cannot arrest ourselves out of this. I could triple their officers and it wouldn't be enough to cover the cases. Mr. Secretary, how many people have died from fentanyl in this country? In the last 3 years, the last year?
Senator, I would be pleased to provide you with that data.
What would be your guess?
Senator, I don't want to guess. But
So you don't know. 250,000 Americans have died from fentanyl poisoning, and that's on your shoulders. How many people have you paroled in the last 3 years? Any idea?
Senator, I would be pleased, as I
You can't.
mentioned.
You're in charge of this. You have no idea. Is it 1 million? Is it 2 million? Is it 2 or 3?
Senator, I would be pleased to provide.
How many of those have committed a crime? How many people that have you paroled have committed a crime?
Senator, if you would be, if you're pleased to.
Mr.
provide
Secretary,
the-
do you recall a visit in January to Eagle Pass? You were in Eagle Pass in January. Do you recall that
I
visit?
recall the precise month, but I've made over 20 visits to the border, so forgive me for not remembering the.
You recall
particular
being in a room in Eagle Pass, Texas, with a large number of Border Patrol officers. Did you admit the release rate was 85% at that time?
Oh, as I've testified before, I don't remember the particular exchange to which you refer.
What percent would you say, or what range would you say are released?
I don't want to guess, but as I've said before, Senator, I would be pleased to provide you with whatever data.
How can you come to this hearing and not know these things? These are things that I know, and this is 1/100th of my job as well. So listen, you said at that meeting, and I got multiple witnesses, that that we were releasing 85% of the folks at the border. There's no way possible that you could vet that number of people at a time. 85% of the people coming in illegally, breaking our laws, no vetting process, essentially giving them a phone, free health care, and a plane ticket or bus ride to somewhere. You say you're protecting the nation's sovereignty, but you've really facilitated an invasion. Sir, this is an invasion. 11 million illegal encounters under your watch. Next question. Why are you mass importing tens of thousands of Venezuelans into our country via parole, knowing they can't be deported because Venezuela isn't accepting removal flights?
We are not doing that, Senator.
You're not paroling tens of thousands of Venezuelans into this country.
Senator, your question was broader than that. The way you framed your question, we are not doing that which you asked.
Are you importing tens of thousands of Venezuelans into this country?
The term importation is incorrect. We have a Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan parole program for those Venezuelans who are paroled and who do not have a basis to remain.
So why are you paroling them knowing that Venezuela won't take return flights?
So that is false. We have, in fact, negotiated in the past removal flights to Venezuela. Those are suspended right now. We also remove Venezuelans to Mexico, for example. So an individual who does
So why do you say it's not correct when it's been suspended? That's why Americans don't trust you. That's why Americans don't trust the government anymore, is because you're setting up, you're twisting the truth, giving incomplete answers. This is really a de facto amnesty orchestrated by your administration. There's a reason why Venezuelans won't take them back. Next question. It's my understanding that we have technology deployed that helps track the number of gotaways that have unlawfully crossed our borders and evaded capture by our border patrols. Is that correct?
We do have technology that is a force multiplier for our personnel.
Okay. Again, under oath today, I'm asking you, has this technology been operational since you took the post?
I would like to get back to you if there's any deficit in its operational capability. Senator, I'd be pleased to get back to you on that.
Has the system ever gone down under your tenure?
I'd be very pleased to provide you with that subsequent to this hearing.
How could you not know that? How could you not know what type of, is it been down once or twice? Has it been down for weeks at a time, months at a time? Any just range or thought that you could give us? Do you keep track of it in any way, shape, or form?
Senator, we deploy so many different technologies across the expanse of our department, which consists of 268,000 people. If a technology goes down for a short period of time, I may not have visibility of that. I'm the secretary of the department.
Do you think it's been down for a significant amount of time or an insignificant amount of time?
Senator, as I've previously said, I would be pleased to provide you with the information you request subsequent to this hearing. I will look into it.
How can you keep track of the gotaways if you have no program in place that tells us when this is working or not working?
I'm sorry. Senator, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, how can you tell how many gotaways you're reporting if you don't know when this technology is working or not working? In other words, how do we know that the 2 million known gotaways is a good number?
Senator, the individuals on the ground in U.S. Customs and Border Protection have visibility of the operational capability of the equipment they use. They oversee counting the number of individuals who evade detection to the best.
But you rely on technology to observe those as well, and you don't know if your technology is working or not working.
Senator, I believe I've answered the question.
No, you've not. You've said you don't know. The answer you've given is you do not know. You don't know much of any of the answers to the questions we're asking you. This is why we need an impeachment trial. This is why Americans are demanding an impeachment trial. I yield back.